Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell talks about the notion of what it takes to be successful, and he starts with the idea of the notion that, especially in the United States, we like to think about the self-made man who went from nothing and just by sheer gumption succeeds. And he kind of breaks it down and he talks about different factors that contribute, but we don't usually acknowledge or see as much of. So one of those is timing. He talks about the idea that timing is very important in terms of when in the year you're born, and the effect that can have on your performance in school and athletics and things of that nature, but also timing as far as your age when certain booms happen or certain elements. He suggests the idea of Bill Gates and the timing of his computer and interest. But there's other ones that you can see throughout history, whether you're talking about post World War II, where you just have a smaller population and the effects of that, or new discoveries, new inventions, all a lot of different possibilities. So he talks about timing and that role. He also talks about the hours of experience, the idea that being a genius or being a success at something doesn't necessarily pertain to some natural ability per se, but also has a level of how many hours of practice have been put in order for you to achieve that. He gives this magical number of 10,000 hours, and that's the difference between truly mastering something or not, which I'll get back to as far as the role of or the effect of this theory on education. And then the last one he talks about is ethnicity and kind of your background and where you come from, whether this is something of your culture or something that's been historically part of the people who were brought up. For example, he gives the example of the Jewish community and the Jewish immigrants in the United States and how they came from urban centers in Europe to New York, so they were familiar with cities and kind of that city life, and then also they had trades, business in this case, tailors and clothing makers, and that's how they ended up becoming successful, because they had skills and knowledge, historically speaking, amongst this community that immigrated, and their and where the new location they came into, which would work in other moments in U.S. history where you have immigrants who come and settle the Wild West, or settle the West, who are experienced as farmers. So what does this all mean? Well, the impact for schooling is, one thing that he talks about is how we sort children, that we aren't fully using all our potential because of arbitrary cutoff lines and judgment or evaluation of kids compared to peers who we define as peers but may not truly be peers, suggesting that we should group our students based on the birth date or the developmental level or the maturity of them, and then evaluate and assess them, because then we would be, in essence, he's suggesting that we are already setting kids up for failure because of these arbitrary dates. So he's suggesting almost a tracking, but tracking based on not per se ability, but maturity or age. So, an interesting take. I think it is relevant and it is important. I think I'll talk about the critiques later. The type of education we are offering students, the idea that in order for kids to really reach a level of mastery, they need to have a lot of practice with it, and that it's not just this quick kind of teach and be done with it, that we really need them to practice using it. And how do schools define success is another one in terms of, he gives examples of geniuses in this genius study, but they don't per se go on to greatness because of the way the environment and what is offered to them, and that it's not a student's quote-unquote natural ability. It isn't from inherited or born, but there's other factors that have applied to it. So rather than dismissing a child as lower level and so forth, there are things that should be done in order to get them up to the speed of, or to their highest potential, and not just kind of writing them off. And then he talks about school where there's sacrifices that are made in the name of education, and this kind of goes along the ideas of success. He talks about this KIPS program that's inner city that gets kids up to high level math, but the kids have to go to school for longer, spend more time working on it because that's what's necessary in order for them to reach that level of success. And this kind of goes back to the idea that kids from affluent families will have had more exposure through the parents' cultural knowledge and education level that puts them ahead. And so in order for kids who are coming from families with lower education traditionally need more provided for them in the classroom. So some of the implications for schooling. Critiques. I think there's an oversimplification of events. I think that there's a level of him saying, "Oh, this KIPS program works so well," and I think it does. But I think that there are sacrifices that are being made that may or may not be worth it in the long run. There's more and more evidence suggesting that creative thinking has to be done with when students kind of have their own time. And I also am curious, to what level are these really solutions to the KIPS program and so forth in a capitalist society where there will be constantly this shifting, and it's asking a lot of a student at a very young age to make a sacrifice and a decision. But at the same time, if it has that success, who am I to say that a student who isn't driven shouldn't go for it? And that goes to my last one, which is cost benefit. The notion of what is that student sacrificing in terms of childhood, in terms of exploration, discovery, family, all of that in nature. And then I think it's impossible to account for everything. I think that even if we set programs up like this, there are other aspects that he doesn't address. That you'll never be able to set up something where everybody is successful, and even if you break up the groups, for example, for hockey or things like that, into different age brackets within like birth date brackets, you're still in the end looking for success. You're looking for someone to succeed and someone else who will not. And there are extenuating circumstances, little pieces of luck that are uncontrollable. I think overall I enjoyed the book because it does break down that idea of, well, if you really want it, you can get it. You just have to work hard at it, which I think is a myth that does need to be busted. But I still am lacking for concrete solutions to how to solve it. But overall, I enjoyed the book.